All right, everybody, welcome to the stream. My name is Ryan, and this is As It Is Written. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to be doing a quick, probably an hour to an hour and a half stream, and we will be starting off by watching Chuck Missler, and he is going to be explaining how we live in an electrical simulation, which I think will be very interesting, and I will have, hopefully, a lot of comments on that. So, here we go.
What a privilege to be with you guys. I've got 1,800 seconds to try to get along a message here, so we'll just jump in. There are only two views among us. The one is that everything's the result of a cosmic accident, or we're the result of a deliberate design, and that implies a designer. That's the first Y in the road that would divide us. Now, that basic thing brings us each to three questions, personal questions. Where did I come from? Why am I here? And where am I going when I die? Those issues face every one of us. Now, most of you that know me from our broadcasts or whatever know that our entire ministry, the last 5 decades, have been based on two discoveries. And my telling you is not enough. You have to discover this for yourself. The first is that we have 66 books, hopefully sitting in your lap, that were written by over 40 guys who didn't even know each other over a period of almost 2,000 years. The discovery is, in two parts, we have in our possession an integrated message system. Even though it was written in 66 books by over 40 guys over almost 2,000 years, we now discover that every detail, every number, every place name, is there by deliberate design. And that's something you have to discover for yourself. But when you do, it'll change your entire perspective, because you'll stumble to a second discovery deriving from that one, that the origin of that message system had to come from outside our time domain, because it writes history before it happens with a precision that's staggering. And those discoveries are something you need to discover for yourself. And I don't mean just thematically. Every number, every letter in both the Old and New Testament is there in the original, is there by deliberate design. Now, we made reference here to Psalm 19. C.S. Lewis says the greatest psalm in the Psalms and one of the greatest lyrics in the world. Let's take a close look at the first few verses of Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out throughout all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. That may be familiar to you, but let's examine it. You'll discover every line talks about the information sciences. Declare, showeth, other speech, showeth knowledge, speech, language, voice. See, every line speaks of the information sciences. And so the point of this is there is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. That's holding us all accountable. And Paul makes that point in Romans chapter 1. The invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, but being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. And so that holds us accountable too. The following terms, I want to show you a series of opposites. We have disorder and order, noise and signal. Engineers like to improve the signal-to-noise ratio. Cacophony and music, chaos and cosmos, randomness or design. Those are opposites. We need to understand that. Those on the left are all expressions of a term that mathematically we call entropy. Think of entropy as randomness, and you'd be shocked at how many brilliant mathematicians, including Stephen Hawking, don't follow this correctly. Entropy is equivalent to randomness. The opposite of that is information. Each one on the left is the opposite of the ones on the right. And you need to understand those are opposites. In fact, as time goes on, things will drift to the left. You clean up your garage or your locker in school. After a few weeks, it's back the way it was. Things tend towards randomness, towards entropy. And I want to develop that a little as we go. Randomness and entropy, most of us have been trained in deterministic mathematics, but there's a whole other field of mathematics, stochastic, where there's random variables involved. It's a different process. In fact, random numbers are almost impossible to find. What you technically find when you need them are what called pseudo-random numbers that are almost random. Getting a true random number is a real challenge. In fact,
by definition, it is impossible to get a truly random number because in order to get that number, you had to go through some kind of a process. And by going through a process, you are not allowing it to be random. And so that's why he's going to explain that there's this book by the Rand Corporation called A Million Random Digits.
The granddaddy of think tanks, the Rand Corporation, back in 1955, had a milestone book which they published called 1 Million Random Digits and 100,000. That book, if I had it sitting here, I don't carry it because it's big and heavy, but the point is, that book, if you look at it, you think it's a put-on, a joke. You open it up and it's full of random numbers. And to the layman, you sort of laugh. That's pretty silly. No, it was a breakthrough in science because the Rand Corporation had access to the most powerful computers available at that time. And the idea, that's not as trivial as it sounds. What is the defining characteristic of that book? The total absence of design. They used supercomputers to explore that thoroughly so there was no symmetry, no predictability, no patterns of any kind, no predictability. As best as we could make it at that time, that was the best available, is that was a source of random numbers. That may sound silly if you haven't been in a laboratory where you need random numbers for some purpose. They're hard to find. So with that background, I want to move into the topic that they've asked me to speak on, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, if you master and understand and command that, it'll solve all your other problems. That's the granddaddy of them all. In the Hebrew, of course, it goes from right to left. All languages flow towards Jerusalem. You know that. East of Jerusalem, they go right to left. West of Jerusalem, they go left to right. And whether it's Cyrillic or English or Latin on the one hand, or Aramaic, Hebrew, or whatever on the Sanskrit on the right. But anyway, Bereshit bara, the word bara is to create out of nothing. There are other words that can be used, asa or vasa, that's to make or fashion. When it used bara, that's from out of nothing. And then we encounter Bereshit bara Elohim. Now you probably know enough Hebrew exposure to know that a masculine word with an I-am ending is a plural. Elohim is a plural noun. But there's something very strange because every time you see that in the Bible, it's misused. You know enough about language to know the noun is supposed to be declined with the verb. They're supposed to match. Elohim is a plural noun, but it's always used as a singular by the verb. Elohim, every place you see it, is a technical error in a sense. Elohim is a plural noun. What you also need to know about Hebrew is that a plural is not two, it's three. They have a single, a dual, and a plural. But let's move on and take a look at Genesis 1, because that's...
I actually didn't know that. I had no idea that they had a single, a duo, and a multiple. So that's even more incredible that God used that word as opposed to the dual word there. So that's how we know that he's at least three parts. But we do know from the rest of the scripture that there are three, well, parts is the wrong word, personalities. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it properly. But there is God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit.
It's really the subject here. God said, let there be light, and there was light, and God saw the light, and that it was good. God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were day one. And now, the word evening, that's translated evening, comes from the word erev. That came to mean eve, but that wasn't the original concept behind it. And the other word is boker, which is, now they use it for morning. Why do they do that? Because neither of these, by the way, will show up on day 7. Did it not have an evening and morning? Of course it did. But what the words are focusing is on a prior, more pervasive meaning. Let's take a look at an entropy profile of the universe. I'm putting entropy at the bottom of the chart and order at the top. In other words, entropy is the maximum at the bottom, and order is maximum at the top. Are you with me so far? Okay. Day one, we have Erev and Boker, which is a reduction of entropy or an increase in order, okay? Erev means disorder or obscurity. And at night, things are dark and obscure. And that word also becomes meaning for night, but it's a pun, but the prior meaning is Erev. Boker is discernible order. We're going from disorder to order, going from Erev to Boker. And that comes to mean morning and evening, but that is a pun, if you will, of a deeper meaning, if I may. Now, on that first day, God makes his first direct quote in the Bible, "Let light be." And let's take a look at, as we study the very nature of light. Boy, we could spend a whole hour talking about that. But most of you realize that every particle has an antiparticle, and when an antiparticle hits a positive particle, they annihilate each other and give off a photon, give off light. And Richard Feynman will tell you a reversal of light, that particle is that same particle in a time reversal. But another way of saying that is if I reverse the entropy, that shows how light can create a symmetrical set of particles out of nothing. And that's the mechanism we find in day one. But let's move to day two. From Erev to Boker, there's another step of creation, and that's creating the atoms and the molecules. Let's talk about an atom, because this is a grasp you really need to get. We've all in school made little diagrams, and I'm using hydrogen, one of the simple ones. We have a nucleus and an electron going around it. This is not the scale, but I'm going to try to communicate the scale to you if I can. We know that the atom is about 10 to the minus 8 centimeters in size. The nucleus is about 10 to the minus 13. The numbers aren't important, but the ratio is. What we're saying here is that it takes 100,000 that distance to make the orbit of the electron. 100,000. The ratio between the two is 10 to the fifth, 100,000. Well, if that's the linear distance, the area would be that squared, right? So that would be 10 to the 10th. The volume would be that number cubed. You with me so far? How many follow that? Okay, good, great. It's neat talking to men. Women usually aren't with me here. Okay. So that's the 10 to the 15th number is a staggering number. And I remember I was on a board with Dr. Teller, and they were using a 10 to the 15th number, and I said, wow, that's more than there are seconds in 30 million years. And they looked at me shocked. They use those numbers, but they didn't have a personal grasp of what they mean. See, 10 to the 15th is the same ratio as 1 second has to 30 million years. See, when I say it that way, you get a feeling for what 10 to the 15th is. If I say this podium is solid, and you'd say, no, Chuck, there's nothing here, you're more right than I am by a ratio of 1 second to 30 million years.
If you aren't following exactly what he's saying is that the distance between the proton and the electron is such that if you were to extrapolate out all of the empty space inside of the atom, there would be significantly more empty space than there is actual material substance, okay? And so the way that atoms work is atoms are going to stack on top of each other with their electrons repelling the other atoms. As you know, like repels and opposites attract. And so the electrons repel each other in the shells around the atoms. So that's how that works. And what he's saying is that there is significantly more empty space inside of the atom than there is in total. And so what we think of as a solid table is 99% empty space.
This is an electrical simulation. It feels solid because the molecules of my hand are colliding with the molecules of the... So it feels solid. That's an electrical illusion. It's a virtual thing. We're going to get into that, believe it or not. So passion seatbelts. We're learning the properties. Space is not empty. It has permittivity, it has permeability. As any radio ham will tell you, it has intrinsic impedance. When you tune an antenna for transmission, you're trying to match the impedance to the impedance of space. Velocity of light, of course, has been slowing down. That's a whole other story. But the 0-point energy, most physicists will tell you that's just a mathematical concept. No, there's a surprise coming. They've now discovered that the 0-point energy is measurable, it's staggering, and it's revising our whole perception of subatomic particles. So that it happens as you get into that and really understand the fabric space, the arguments fall into our lap as creationists, by the way. And I won't go into all the details there. I'll just highlight that you be aware of this as you hear talked about. If the temperature of an empty container is lowered to absolute zero, there remains a residual amount of thermal energy that cannot by any means be removed. It's called the 0-point energy. A vacuum is now known to be a vast reservoir of seething energy of which that particles being formed and annihilated constantly. Why does the electron in an atom not radiate itself out and collapse? Why doesn't that happen? Because it's made up by the 0-point energy replaces it. And that's why they continue. That's exactly what Paul tells you in 1 Colossians 1, by the way. But we'll move on here. Let's go to date. We're just getting warmed up. We're going to day 3 already. The oceans and so forth, not radiate itself out and collapse. Why doesn't that happen? Because
All right, sorry about that. Little one of those days. And he is before. And so Colossians 1:17 says, "And he is before all things, and in him all things consist."
because it's made up by the 0-point energy replaces it. And that's why they continue. That's exactly what Paul tells you in 1 Colossians 1, by the way. But we'll move on here. Let's go to date. We're just getting warmed up.
Okay, at least it wasn't me. He was saying 1 Colossians. Whew, all right, it was both of us.
We're going to day 3 already. And there we have the land and the oceans and so forth. Just take one thing off the earth, take a leaf off a tree, and you discover it's more complicated than most of us can possibly understand. In fact, not only that leaf itself, but its place in the cycle. The plants give off the oxygen and the sugar, and the animals need that, and they give off the CO2, which the plants need. And this whole model is in balance. That not only means it was created, it means it's being maintained. They always say 1% change in the ozone is going to bring cosmic disaster. You've heard that from your greenies, right? Well, if that's true, who balanced it so delicately in the first place? See, that argument that it's rare is an argument for creation, not the accident of design. But we'll move.
Amen. The fact that Earth is so absolutely, precisely, and completely fine-tuned to support life is incredible. There is no other place in our solar system, and we have yet to discover anywhere else in the universe that can actually support life as we do here on Earth. I'm sure there are other places that could, but this is the only one we know about, and we'll see in the future what happens.
Move on. Let's go to day 4. Adrian Boker, we come to what we call our solar system. Bear with me on this model, because I think this is one of the things you'll want to take away in your notes. Robert Burnham publishes a celestial almanac, and in that he has a chapter that's too provocative to pass. He takes advantage of a coincidence. The number of inches in a statute mile is 63,360. Okay. It turns out, the basic unit in astronomy is the distance from the Earth to the Sun. That's called an astronomical unit. It happens, the number of inches in a statute mile is roughly about 63,300. The number of astronomical units, in a light year is roughly the same number to a 0.1% difference. So that's a convenient way to make a model. If we're going to make a model here of the universe, we can use that ratio and carry it out. In Burnham's model, 1 inch represents the distance of the sun to the earth. 1 mile represents a light year. You with me so far? Okay. Well, the sun is about 9/1000th of an inch. Let's call it 100th of an inch. Okay. So it's about the size of a period on a sentence on your paper. On your piece of paper, you have a period there. That's about, I'm going to suggest that's probably about 100th of an inch. You with me? That's the size of our sun in this model. All planets will turn out to be lying within a 1 meter circle. The Earth will be 1 inch away from the sun by definition. Mercury and Venus, 4/10 or 7/10 radius. Mars about 1.6 inches. Jupiter about 5 inches. Saturn about 9.5. Uranus about 19.2. Neptune 30.0. Pluto 39.5 inches. In other words, if we're building this model, we have a period, the center at the sun, and the entire model would be within a radius of 1 meter. Are we together so far? So far we're doing it. We can sort of visualize that. That's important. Well, the nearest star is Alpha Centauri, 4.5 light years away. Okay, so we need a speck. It's about the same size as our sun, so it's a speck about the size of a period.
I just want to point this out, not that Chuck Missler has said anything wrong. What's absolutely incredible is that the sun has its gravitational influence, and it exerts that gravitational influence a mile away from itself. Okay, or a light year. All right. So if we have Proxima Centauri, that's it says 4.5 light years away, and then we have the sun. The sun's gravitational influence goes 1/4 of the way towards the nearest star. It goes out that direction it goes out that far in all directions, but I just find that absolutely fascinating how huge our solar system really is. And so when we have there's certain comets that will only come swing by the sun once every few tens of thousands of years, and that's because they are over a light year away from Earth at their farthest, or sorry, not Earth, from the sun at their farthest. And so, I just find that very fascinating. Not necessarily anything to do with this lecture, but we'll get back.
That we've got to not only place 4.5 miles away in our model, okay? That's 2 specks of dust, 4.5 miles apart. How much influence would gravity have? Two specks of dust, 4.5 miles away, when you're supposed to square the distance between them. In other words, it's worse than that. By the way, the Milky Way would be 100,000 miles in radius. If you look at your equation of gravitation, it has a denominator of the distance squared. In other words, whatever the distance is, you've got to square that in the denominator, which means the further away they are, it disappears into being meaningless. You with me so far? See, the plasma physicists have been trying to tell that to us for several decades. The astronomers aren't listening. They haven't done the math. If you take a look at your fundamental forces from your textbooks, you'll discover that gravity is 10 to the minus 38, electromagnetic 10 to the minus 2. In other words, electromagnetics outperform gravity by 10 with 36 zeros after it. Not 36,000 times, 36 umptiums, whatever you're going to call. And by the way, electric pushes and pulls. Gravity doesn't. So the real point is, the minute you go beyond our solar system, look at the sky, the galaxies, gravity is a non-player. And what's astonishing, there are bright mathematicians spinning all kinds of theories that make no sense because they haven't done the math. 99.9% of the mass of the universe is not solid. It's not solid, liquid, or gas. It's plasma. It is ionized gas. And the plasma pioneers have been trying to tell us that they can create the same shapes in the laboratory using Maxwell equations, not gravity. And so we have all this in our briefing package if you want to chase these things down. But the real point is, let's go one step further. We then have the birds, and we have this whole business of the death of Darwinism. The thing that put the nails in Darwin's coffin was, of course, microbiology. Advances in microbiology, the DNA and so forth, have dealt the death blow to Darwinism. The DNA happens to be, we discover, a 3 out of 4 error-correcting code. An alphabet of 3 to use 3 out of 4, alphabet of 22, 3 out of 4. That is, there's probably not an engineer in the audience that can build and can design an error-correcting code. Error detecting, step 1. No, the next step is an error-correcting code. It turns out if you use 11 bits rather than 8 for a byte, you can make it error-correcting to a certain level. We've now discovered, recently there's articles, they've discovered that the code in the DNA has a code within the code, because there's common codes that do the same thing, but not quite the same thing. And they take a little longer because it changes the three-dimensional shape, and there's more coding that they're discovering. There's a whole other level of coding to it.
Yeah, human DNA is incredibly complicated, and to imagine that came about through random chance is absolutely incredible. You can't possibly think, you couldn't possibly believe that if you actually looked at the evidence. The evidence that random muck came together and formed intelligible DNA that then slowly changed into a human being is just absurd. There is absolutely no evidence to suggest that happened, and in fact, all of the evidence suggests that it is absolutely impossible for muck to turn into intelligible DNA. It can't happen, couldn't happen, never happened.
Darwinism cannot explain the origin of life because it cannot explain the origin of information. That's the corker. Irreducible complexity that Michael B. introduces definitely just renders chance or randomness as it refutes that as a possible designer. And you can get into that on your own. But let's take 6. You've always heard the 6 is the number of man. How many have heard that biblically? Well, it's a little more than that. We go on the 6th day, and I'm going to use Da Vinci's Vitruvian of man as a symbol of man and his reach, if you will. 6 is the number of man we hear. It turns out, I read this and I didn't believe it. I thought it was some Christian contrivance. I checked it out. It turns out to be true. A cellular level, an intact human immune system will virtually always recognize and reject a non-human transplant as foreign. How? The underlying characteristic, what's the underlying characteristic of humanity? On virtually every nucleated cell in a person are small markers, lipoproteins to be precise, called antigens. Their official designation is the histocompatibility antigen or human leukocyte antigen. HLA is the common thing. And it turns out certain antigens are the same in every human and are only found in humans, although given individuals may have different arrangements and collections of these molecules. That's what makes it's important in blood transfusions and other things. The irony is that every person, on virtually every cell in that person, this marker mankind's product, and it's a product of one certain chromosome. Its chromosome, guess which number? 6. I used to think that was a contrivance. No, it turns out that's the locus of the genes that encode humans on the surface of the cells and so forth. And so it has many other functions, but it resides on number 6. I thought that was interesting. But the interesting, provocative thing.
I think it being the number 6 there is a bit of a coincidence rather than yeah. So the issue, what is it, Chronic 72, the issue with the many tries problem is that it's not like there's just a pile of genetic material that's sitting around ready to be assembled into whatever we want it to be assembled into or whatever would make life. The issue is that the material that would create life degrades. So if you leave a banana out on the table for a week, it's going to degrade into something that is mush, okay? And so you have 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 different components that need to go into DNA, and if you leave any one of those components out on the table for a week, it will decay and it will disappear and it won't be useful for life. And so you need to get 100,000 of those different proteins to all be there at the right time in order for that DNA to turn into life and to turn into a cell. And so the very slim chance, we're talking absolutely insane chances. And in fact, the environment of the Earth, it's not like it's a lab. The environment of the Earth is an ever-changing landscape, okay? So at the beginning of the formation of the Earth, it was a molten rock. Okay, there wasn't any land for life to form on. And then throughout the history of Earth, generally Earth has been very hostile to life. And so to imagine that all of these different materials that are going to rot and decay, well, not rot because rot would imply that there is already life, but that are going to break down and decay, and that they would sit in one spot long enough for them to randomly combine into the right substance, it's just an absolutely absurd idea that you have been taught by your educational system. And the scientists know that this is an absurd belief, and they refuse to look into it, and they refuse to accept that that is the reality. I don't know why.
When you get to day 7, we know that the creation stopped, right? How many knew that God rested on the 7th day? Okay, not on Sunday. That's sad. That's Shabbat, by the way. But let's move on here. Okay. What's interesting is there's no Erev and Boker on that day. That's a tip-off that those words had more original. They're used as puns for evening and morning daily, and that's why the Hebrew calendar starts in the evening, ends in the morning, because of that patterning. But that's not what the words originally meant. In fact, when we go through Genesis and our commentary, we have a full lecture series on each day. On day 1, we get into the paradoxical nature of light itself, the gap between the first 2 verses, and that sort of thing. On the second day, we get into the fabric of space, hypertension, quantum physics, and so on. On the third day, we get into life vegetation, that's the origin of life, thermodynamics and entropy, and molecular chemistry. On the 4th day, we get into the nuclear hypothesis myth. What you're taught in college about the story of the origin is provably not true, but it's still taught in college for some weird reason. The anthropic principle, and astrobiology is a science without any evidence. The frustration of astrobiology is there is no life anywhere off the Earth, so trying to study evidence of that is a waste of time because they can't find any. They've been looking for it. But anyway, we move on. We call evolution, you really mean biogenesis, but we get into that on the 5th day, of course, for a lot of reasons. And then we get into the fallacies and frauds of 6th day and all that. And then, of course, the 7th day is a provocative thing because that when God enforces a repose on the universe, he makes the laws firm. So there's another thing I want to highlight, and I'm going to draw for this on the Scientific American articles recently. I'm going to use the symbol of man to represent the reach of man. If I'm going to focus on things larger than man, I'll call that collectively the macrocosm. And the 4th dimension of time, of course, is in that subject. It had a beginning. The big discovery of 20th century science is that the universe is finite, not infinite. It may be expanding, but it's finite, not infinite. That's the problem. That means it had a beginning, and that's why they have these speculations called the Big Bang models. But the fact that it's finite is a key fact. Let's go the other way. Let's go things that are smaller, man. Let's do what we call the microcosm. We discover that in subatomic particles, there's a limit to smallness. That's why we're spending tens of billions of dollars on the Hadron Colliders to try to learn more about smallness. It turns out there's a limit to smallness. It's called the Planck wall, if you will. Indivisible units. Planck limits for length, mass, energy, and time. You would think if I take a piece of string and cut it in half, I can throw the half away and do it again. You think, I could do that forever. I might get so small I couldn't handle it, but conceptually I could always figure whatever I got I can cut in half. I discovered that's not true. When it gets 10 to the minus 33 centimeter and I try to cut it in half, it loses a property that the physicists call locality. There's a property called non-locality. That thing is provably everywhere in the universe at one time, and that's been proven in the laboratory, by the way. So that's not just a theory anymore. And we now don't think of 3 or 4 dimensions. We know we live in at least 10. That's the current estimate. But the key point that you want to understand the implications of is that both the macrocosm has a finite and of largeness, and there's a finite limit to smallness. That has staggering implications in our understanding of reality. because the Scientific American article that deals with, see, we live in a finite digital simulated universe. It's a virtual digital environment that we find ourselves in. Now, this is not my conclusion. This is the words of Scientific American, June of 2005, where they conclude that our universe is but a shadow of a larger reality. That's their words, not mine. And when I first read that, it blew me away, because that's exactly what the Bible has been saying all along. In John 1, Hebrews 1, on and on. That larger reality, our reality is in a larger context. For lack of another term, I'll call it the metacosm. That's the domain of the angels. That's the domain, apparently, of the UFOs. There's a region that is a transfer function in and out of our finite simulation that we call our physical reality. This is all provable. This isn't theoretical. This is provable stuff. We think of three dimensions. We've been taught Euclidean geometry, 3 dimensions. But the most important lecture in mathematics ever given was June 10th of 1854, when George Riemann disclosed metric tensors. It took 60 years for them to find practical use, and that's what Einstein used for his theory of relativity when he recognized that we live in not 3 but 4 dimensions. And so, then in Ephesians chapter 3, Paul tells us that, by the way, if you're watching for it. Ephesians 3:17, that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, that ye, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all saints what is that breadth, length, and depth, and height, to know the love of Christ which passes knowledge, that you might be filled with all the fullness of God. The point is breadth, length, depth, and height. Anyway, 4 dimensions. Back in the 12th century, a Hebrew sage by the name of Nachmanides, by studying Genesis, concluded the universe has 10 dimensions. We can only know about 4 of them. His writings in his commentary on Genesis. The particle physics in the 20th century have now concluded that we live in about 10 dimensions. That's a current estimate. 4 are directly measurable, 3 in time. 6 of them are curled less than 10 to the minus 30 centimeters, too small light, so we can only infer them indirectly. In other words, we've spent millions of dollars on atomic accelerators to learn what Nachmanides learned from studying the text of Genesis. And you think I'm kidding, I'm not, I'm quite serious. So most of what we know about the creation is post-curse, because we all know about Genesis 3. History as we know it started after that curse. We had the flood of Noah, among other things, that have increased the entropy, decreased the order, if you will. Now, entropy is called the bondage of decay in Romans 8:21, and there are many of us that believe it was introduced as part of the curse. The universe was fractured, separated from 4 to 6 dimensions is one speculation. And at that curse, we have the physical universe, which we can directly access, but the other 6 dimensions are not accessible to us now. And we call that the spiritual universe, or I would call it the metacosm, if you will. Genesis 3, the shining one, the forbidden fruit, you all know the story, the doubt and then the denial that Satan created that resulted in God's declaration of war, in which the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent are the 2 contestants, if you will, in a sense. And the seed of the woman being a title of Christ, and the seed of the serpent is one who is yet to make his appearance in our history shortly. You are both the pawns and the prize in that warfare. And that's why we're here together on this thing. Why right now? I'm going to put something on the screen which, if you accept, you flunk the course. I want you to challenge. I'm putting it up on sincerely, but I want you to challenge it. I believe that you and I are being plunged into a period of time about which the Bible says more than it does about any other period of time in history, including the time that Jesus walked the shores of Galilee. And so, now, the more you know about the classic biblical scenario and the pending turmoil amidst the current geopolitical tensions every day that are increasing, the more you will recognize that we are indeed plunging into what's called in the scripture the end times.
Now, I may share a lot of his beliefs that we are going into the end times, but we don't know. It could still be another 1,000 years. It could still be another 2,000 years. It could be another 10,000 years before Jesus comes back. We can't know that as we are right now, and we will know when we meet Jesus.
You can prove it. And the encroaching darkness is making all of us increasingly politically incorrect. To be a biblical Christian is going to be increasingly a life-threatening posture you're going to have. And as J. Vernon McGee and others predicted, the attack against the biblical Christian will come from the denominational churches. And that's a shock, but you can find it documented by E.H. Broadbent in his book, The Pilgrim Church. Are you prepared for that? We meet here and enjoy this. This is great. Are you prepared for what's really coming? Are you prepared? Microsoft is not. Okay, I'll try to get another. Okay. Even correct science won't help you. Only a personal relationship with the designer himself will help you. Do you know him? That's the question of the day. Search the scriptures, you're challenged by him, and he takes the commitment that you will know. He will assume the responsibility to reveal himself to you. So I'll close with a contemporary example here. Just one, then I'll be off here. In 1980, a man from Rwanda was forced by his tribe to either renounce Christ or face certain death. He refused to renounce Christ, and he was killed on the spot. The night before, he had written the following commitment, which is found in his room. I'm a part of the fellowship of the unashamed. I have Holy Spirit power. The die's been cast. I've stepped over the line. The decision has been made. I'm a disciple of his. I won't look back, let up, slow down, back away, or be still. My past is redeemed. My present makes sense. My future is secure. I'm finished with low living, sight walking, small planning, smooth knees, colorless dreams, tamed visions, mundane talking, cheap living, and dwarf goals. I no longer need preeminence, prosperity, position, promotions, plaudits, or popularity. You can tell you went to seminary because you make an alliteration that proves it's true, right? Okay. I don't have to be right, first, tops, recognized, praised, regarded, or rewarded. I know I now live by faith. I lean on his presence. I walk by patience. I lift by prayer and labor by power. My face is set. My gait is fast. My goal is heaven. My road is narrow. My way rough. My companions few. My guide reliable, but my mission is clear. I cannot be bought, compromised, detoured, lured away, turned back, deluded, or delayed. I will not flinch in the face of sacrifice, hesitate in the presence of the adversary. I will not negotiate at the table of the enemy. I will not ponder at the pool of popularity or meander in the maze of mediocrity. I won't give up, shut up, let up until I have stayed up, stored up, prayed up, paid up, and preached up for the cause of Christ. Praise God. I'm a disciple of Jesus. I must go till he comes, give till I drop, preach till all know, work till he stops me, and when he comes for his own, he'll have no problems recognizing me. My banner will be clear. Praise God. A little more, but I think I'm over my time. God bless you. Thank you.
Amen. May we all have the faith that African pastor had shortly before he was martyred. So tonight, one of those days. Today, we are going to end by reading out of the Bible as we usually do. So we have Numbers chapter 3 and Acts chapter 16. So we'll get right on into it with Numbers chapter 3. Now, these are the records of Aaron and Moses when the Lord spoke with Moses on Mount Sinai. And these are the names of the sons of Aaron, Nadab the firstborn, and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. These are the names of the sons of Aaron, the anointed priests, whom he consecrated to minister as priests, Nadab and Abihu had died before the Lord when they offered profane fire before the Lord in the wilderness of Sinai, and they had no children. So Eleazar and Ithamar ministered as priests in the presence of Aaron their father. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Bring the tribe of Levi near, and present them before Aaron the priest, that they may serve him, and they shall attend to his need and the needs of the whole congregation, before the tabernacle of meeting, to do the work of the tabernacle. Also they shall attend to all the furnishings of the tabernacle of meeting, and to the needs of the children of Israel, to do the work of the tabernacle. And ye shall give the Levites to Aaron and his sons. They are given entirely to him from among the children of Israel. So you shall appoint Aaron and his sons, and they shall attend to their priesthood. But the outsider who comes near shall be put to death. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Now behold, I myself have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel, instead of every firstborn who opens the womb among the children of Israel. Therefore the Levites shall be mine, because all the firstborn are mine. On the day that I struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I sanctified to myself all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. They shall be mine. I am the Lord. Then the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, saying, Number the children of Levi by their fathers' houses. By their families you shall number every male from a month old and above. So Moses numbered them according to the word of the Lord, as he was commanded. These were the sons of Levi by their names, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And these are the names of the sons of Gershon by their families, Libni and Shimei, and the sons of Kohath by their families, Amram, Izahar, Hebron, and Uziel. And the sons of Merari by their families, Mali and Mushi. These are the families of the Levites by their fathers' houses. From Gershon came the family of the Libnites and the family of the Shimnites. These were the families of the Gershonites, those who were numbered according to the number of all the males from a month old and above. Of those who were numbered, there were 7,500. The families of the Gershonites were to camp behind the tabernacle westward, and the leader of the father's house of the Gershonites was Eliasaph, the son of Lael. The duties of the children of Gershon in the tabernacle of meeting included the tabernacle, the tent with its covering, the screen for the door of the tabernacle of meeting, the screen for the door of the court, the hangings of the court which are around the tabernacle and the altar, and their cords, according to all the work relating to them. From Kohath came the family of the Amorites, the family of the Izharites, the family of the Hebronites, and the family of the Uzalites. These were the families of the Kohathites, according to the number of all the males from a month old and above. There were 8,600 keeping charge of the sanctuary. The families of the children of Kohath were to camp on the south side of the tabernacle, and the leader of the father's house of the families of the Kohathites was Elizaphan, the son of Uziel. Their duty included the ark, the tabernacle, the lampstand, the altars, the utensils of the sanctuary with which they ministered, the screen, and all the work relating to them. And Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, was to be chief over the leaders of the Levites, with oversight of those who kept charge of the sanctuary. From Merari came the family of the Mahlites and the family of the Mushites. These were the families of Merari, and those who were numbered according to the number of all the males from a month old and above were 6,200. The leader of the father's house of the families of Merari was Zuriel, the son of Abihail. These were to camp on the north side of the tabernacle, and the appointed duty of the children of Merari included the boards of the tabernacle, its bars, its pillars, its sockets, its utensils, all the work relating to them, and the pillars of the court all around, with their sockets, their pegs, and their cords. Moreover, those who were to camp before the tabernacle on the east, before the tabernacle of meeting, were Moses, Aaron, and his sons, keeping charge of the sanctuary, to meet the needs of the children of Israel. But the outsider who came near was to be put to death. All who were numbered of the Levites, whom Moses and Aaron numbered at the commandment of the Lord, by their families, all the males from a month old and above, were 22,000. Then the Lord said to Moses, Number all the firstborn males of the children of Israel from a month old and above, and take the number of their names. And ye shall take the Levites for me, I am the Lord, instead of all the firstborn among the children of Israel, and the livestock of the Levites, instead of all the firstborn among the livestock of the children of Israel. So Moses numbered all the firstborn among the children of Israel, as the Lord commanded him. And all the firstborn males, according to the number of names, from a month old and above, of those who were numbered of them, were 22,273. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take the Levites instead of all the firstborn among the children of Israel, and the livestock of the Levites instead of their livestock. The Levites shall be mine. I am the Lord. And for the redemption of the 273 of the firstborn of the children of Israel, who are more than the number of the Levites, you shall take 5 shekels for each one individually. You shall take them in the currency of the shekel of the sanctuary, the shekel of 20 gerahs. And you shall give the money with which the excess number of them is redeemed to Aaron and his sons. So Moses took the redemption money from those who were over and above those who were redeemed by the Levites. From the firstborn of the children of Israel he took the money, 1,365 shekels, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. And Moses gave their redemption money to Aaron and his sons, according to the word of the Lord, as the Lord commanded Moses. All right. That was Numbers 3. We will finish up today with a chapter from Acts, and that will be Acts 16. Then he came to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there named Timothy, the son of a certain Jewish woman who believed, but his father was Greek. He was well spoken of by the brethren who were at Lystra and Iconium. Paul wanted to have him go on with him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in that region, for they all knew that his father was Greek. And as they went through the cities, they delivered to them the decrees to keep, which were determined by the apostles and elders at Jerusalem. So the churches were strengthened in the faith, and increased in number daily. Now, when they had gone through Phrygia and the region of Galatia, they were forbidden by the Holy Spirit to preach the word in Asia. After they had come to Mysia, they tried to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit did not permit them. So passing by Mysia, they came down to Troas, and a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia stood and pleaded with him, saying, Come over to Macedonia and help us. Now after he had seen the vision, immediately we sought to go to Macedonia, concluding that the Lord had called us to preach the gospel to them. Therefore, sailing from Troas, we ran a straight course to Samothrace, and the next day came to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is the foremost city of that part of Macedonia, a colony. And we were staying in that city for some days, and on the Sabbath day we went out of the city to the riverside, where prayer was customarily made, and we sat down and spoke to the women who met there. Now a certain woman named Lydia heard us. She was a seller of purple from the city of Thyatira, who worshipped God. The Lord opened her heart to heed the things spoken by Paul. And when she and her household were baptized, she begged us, saying, If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay. So she persuaded us. Now it happened, as we went to prayer, that a certain slave girl possessed with a spirit of divination met us, who brought her masters much profit by fortune-telling. The girl followed Paul and us, and cried out, saying, These men are the servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to us the way of salvation. And this she did for many days. But Paul, greatly annoyed, turned and said to the spirit, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And he came out that very hour. But when her masters saw that their hope of profit was gone, they seized Paul and Silas, and dragged them into the marketplace to the authorities. And they brought them to the magistrates, and said, These men, being Jews, exceedingly trouble our city, and they teach customs which are not lawful for us, being Romans, to receive or observe. Then the multitude rose up together against them, and the magistrates tore off their clothes, and commanded them to be beaten with rods. And when they had laid many stripes on them, they threw them into prison, commanding the jailer to keep them securely. Having received such a charge, he put them into the inner prison, and fastened their feet in the stocks. But at midnight Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's chains were loosed. And the keeper of the prison, awaking from sleep, and seeing the prison doors open, supposing the prisoners had fled, drew his sword, and was about to kill himself. But Paul called with a loud voice, saying, "Do yourself no harm, for we are all here." Then he called for a light, ran in, and fell down trembling before Paul and Silas. And he brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" So they said, "Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and you will be saved, you and your household." Then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all who were in his house. And he took them the same hour of the night and washed their stripes. And immediately he and all his family were baptized. Now when he had brought them into his house, he set food before them, and he rejoiced, having believed in God with all his household. And when it was day, the magistrates sent the officers, saying, "Let those men go." So the keeper of the prison reported those words to Paul, saying, "The magistrates have sent to let you go. Now therefore depart and go in peace." But Paul said to them, "They have beaten us openly, uncondemned Romans, and have thrown us into prison. And now do they put us out secretly? No, indeed, let them come themselves and get us out." And the officers told these words to the magistrates, and they were afraid when they heard that they were Romans. Then they came and pleaded with them and brought them out, and asked them to depart from the city. So they went out of the prison and entered the house of Lydia. And when they had seen the brethren, they encouraged them and departed. All right, thank you for joining me today. That's all we have for this broadcast. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I will see you hopefully tomorrow morning.